And I have Katie with me today. Hello.
Hi Steve, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I'm loving your little studio setup there. We were just talking about that, weren't we, before I started recording. So Katie, tell us about your career story.
Right, okay. Well, it's quite a long career. I am very old.
Don't look it.
Oh, thank you. I'm actually 51. So basically, let's take right back, because I think there's two parts to my career. So I think I need to just sort of start right back to when I was born. So because there's two parts to me, obviously. So basically, when I was born, I was assigned a gender, a sex based purely on my physical sex characteristics, i.e. what's between my legs. And I was assigned male at birth, and I was given the name Martin Albert Neeves. So that was me labelled. However, at the age of around 3 or 4, I sort of felt different to other boys. And I mean, I had more friends who were girls than were boys, and I was never into sport or anything like that. I had music as my main hobby. But one of my earliest memories at the age of around 3 or 4 was of my mum catching me trying on a pair of my sister's knickers. And I remember at the time it felt so right. It felt as it should. But then when she caught me, she told me off, and then she told me to to take them off, and then for every day of the following week she would pull my shorts down and check to make sure I was wearing my own pants. And then that sowed the seed for life, that what I was doing was wrong, it was bad, it was naughty, it was dirty. And so okay, this doesn't actually relate to my career. It does eventually, but bear with me.
No, you keep going.
But I thought I'd better just explain all this just to set the scene. And so basically that sort of made me sort of feel guilty about it. But then the urge to dress and to cross dress was always there. And so throughout my childhood, I used to secretly dress up in my sister's clothes. So whenever I had the opportunity, I'd just do it in secret. And I remember, it would always feel so right. But then those feelings of feeling right were very quickly superseded by feelings of guilt and self-loathing and self-hatred. And it was for many years before I'd actually admit to myself that I was a cross-dresser, which then that's what I was. But it obviously progressed later on. But that's what I was. But I didn't admit it to myself right up until my mid-20s. But anyway, in the meantime, I was progressing through school, and then I used to do photography as a hobby, and I loved it. And so when it got to the third year of secondary school, I asked if I could go to the local newspaper to spend some time in their photographic department for a week with a week's work experience. And anyway, I managed to get it, and I absolutely loved it. And then I asked them if I could go back at weekends and holidays, and just basically didn't take no for an answer. I just badgered my way in there, and I was probably a bit of a nuisance to them to begin with, because obviously I didn't know much then. But eventually I became useful to them, and I was sort of free labor for them really for a while. And then every now and again they'd offer me some shifts and things which were very, very poorly paid, but I didn't care, because it was just all really good experience. And it was just, I worked for free. I'm happy. I didn't mind. It was just, I just wanted that experience, and it was great. And so I learned an awful lot then. So I did this is showing my age, O levels. There's no GCSEs and all that stuff. It's all O levels, and then I did my A levels. And then I had a course lined up to do. In fact, actually, that's another thing I was point out. With my O levels, one of the options, there was a photography option. And so, of course, I put that was the main thing I wanted to do, and did all the other stuff as well. But then the school actually pulled that course, the photography one, because not enough people wanted to do it. And I was absolutely gutted. It was such a kick in the teeth, because at that early age, I was so passionate about photography, and that's what I knew I wanted to do. And I really thought that was the end. I thought, that's it. I can't be a photographer, because I can't do a photography O level. It was just, I was devastated. And so in the end, I just thought, they like to sort of pigeonhole you at schools with the options. You know, you're either a science person or you're an arty person. You can't be both. And yet I was both, because you know, with photography, obviously you've got to have the arty side of it to see the pictures and the light and framing and all that. But then you also need the technical side of it as well. So it brings both parts together, and you can be both. Yeah, but the options didn't allow for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember my physics teacher doing the photography with us, with the photography teacher, and showing us how those two came together. So.
Exactly, and they really do, and so you can be both. So that was the sort of the first knockback, and so then I ended up doing whatever I could, and I did. I think with the options, I couldn't do art. I couldn't do O-level art. So the only other thing that I had with drawing in it was engineering drawing. My other, you know, I did sort of physics and you know, all the other stuff that I did. But then, of course, when I went on to do my A-levels, because I hadn't done O-level art, I couldn't do A-level art. So again, I couldn't do any of the sort of drawing type stuff. So again, it was just down the sort of technical side. So my A-levels were physics, maths, and engineering drawing. You know. But of course, engineering drawing is just so technical. It was just, you know, drawing flanges and nuts and bolts and things, and it wasn't arty. It wasn't arty at all. But it was just getting some drawing, you know. But at the time, I thought, well, that's the best I can do, sort of thing. But all while I was doing this, I was still going back to the local newspaper and their photographic department and helping them out at weekends and holidays. And I was loving it, absolutely loving it. And then I had a course lined up to do at the end of my A-levels. But it was just perfect timing, because a photographer left. And so they offered me an apprenticeship. So, you know, I thought, well, actually, I can get a lot further in 3 years with an apprenticeship, having a job, you know, but with training, being paid to do this, and getting a professional qualification at the end of it, than if I do a degree. So I didn't do the degree, and I don't regret it for 1 minute. I think degrees, I think there is too much emphasis on people having degrees now, and yet there's just so many, you know, out of work graduates, and whereas having a job with training, I think that apprenticeships are just absolutely brilliant. I really do. And I absolutely loved it. And I went to college block release to do an NCTJ photojournalism course in Sheffield, and that was brilliant. Met some wonderful friends who've been friends for life, and just inspirational people as well. Who they were really good photographers, and I learned a lot from them as well. Had a fantastic time doing that. Got qualified. Left that paper, went on to another paper, because that was a newspaper in Kent, and then I went on to another one in Kent. But it was sort of covering all of South London, and I didn't enjoy that because I was just stuck in all the London traffic all the time. And in those days, it was all the days of film, so there was no digital photography then. God, I sound so old, don't I? So this is going to be the theme of this. Katie feels old. So anyway, so it was all on film. So it was and there were no mobile phones in those days. This is sounding terrible. No mobile phones, so it was radio pages. You know, remember them? You probably don't. You're too young.
I don't actually.
You don't? Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. So so it was this little bleeper thing that went on my belt, yeah, and so what would happen is that when the office had another job for me, they send out this bleep to me. Then I'd have to try and find a phone box that worked and didn't stink of urine, and then phone the office. You're gonna have to do some editing on this, Steve, aren't you? I know.
I was my head
When he
was
says
just
no,
an
don't
image.
edit it.
I had an image of you
care.
going into a phone box and coming out as some superhero, and then my mind went completely different place.
Exactly. So anyway, and then I'd have to phone the office, and they tell me where the next job is, and I go and do that. And then at the end of the day, because there was no time, because of the traffic, London traffic, there was no time to get back to the office, which was in Gravesend, to process the film. So I'd have to all the days processing would have to be done at the end of each day, and so that would extend the day. So they were really long days. Then I had to commute back to where I was living in Kent and Sittingbourne at the time. And so it was, my whole quality of life just plummeted. And I realized that I'd made a mistake when I'd got that job, because it, you know, it just, my whole quality of life wasn't good then. And so that was when I started to look for jobs outside of Kent, because I was born and brought up in Kent. I always thought that was where I was going to stay. I hadn't thought about going anywhere else. But that job really made me think that, and I thought, well, actually, I'm going to have a look elsewhere. And there weren't any decent newspapers really in Kent at the time, so I thought, well, okay, well, let's just see what else is out there. And a job came up at the Coventry Evening Telegraph, and I applied for it. At the time, I think they had about 100 applicants, and I managed to get the job. And so that's how I moved up to the Midlands. So you know, so by that time, I say I'd already been trained up and everything. So it was a job as a senior staff photographer. And of course, during that time, you know, I was still going back to the cross-dressing. I was still secretly cross-dressing and still in denial. But it was, so by then I was in my sort of mid-20s, and then I met a woman who'd become my first wife. We got married, and then I decided I stayed with the Coventry Evening Telegraph for 5 years. Loved it there. It was great. It was a really good job. It was, you know, there was a real buzz about the newsroom and everything, and it was a real step up being a daily newspaper. And then I decided to leave there after 5 years to set up my own freelance photography and video business, which I named after my old male name, Martin. So I called it Martin Neeves Photography and Film. Anyway, so then we got married, so by this time, by my mid-20s, you know, I got married for the first time, got a new business which was become, you know, successful. It was really, I mean, I did loads of things. I did, God, I mean, over that time, you know, when I photographed the 1990 poll tax riots in Trafalgar Square, photographed Princess Diana's funeral, photographed the Yugoslav Civil War in Croatia. I was twice commissioned to photograph the Queen inside Buckingham Palace as well. So, you know, I've done lots of, you know, quite big stuff, you know, and you know, and I got, you know, highly rated with my photography business, and you know, things were going well. And it was only in my mid-20s that I admitted to myself that I was then a cross-dresser. And as soon as I did that, the whole shame and guilt and self-loathing just disappeared. It was just like a whole weight lifting off my shoulders. And I thought, for all these years, I've been fighting it and struggling with it, and just through accepting it, I just felt great. It was fantastic. And I realized that I had a condition called gender dysphoria, which is a great feeling of unease and turmoil caused by a mismatch between how I felt in my head and my heart, i.e. my gender identity, as opposed to my sex characteristics and the sex that the label that I'd been assigned at birth. And but the thing is, with gender dysphoria, it can vary in intensity, and it very often increases over time. And that's what happened with me, and I was completely unprepared for it. You get some trans people, and the level of gender dysphoria is very high from a very early age, and they're the people that need to transition from an early age. But I didn't. You know, I was happy as a man who needed to cross-dress, and that was all it was. You know, I knew what it was. I quantified it, and I was happy. That was fine. So I just compartmentalized it, and that was it. So that was fine. We carried on, and myself and my wife, we stayed together for 13 years. I mean, we should have split. We should have split sooner, but because she never accepted my cross-dressing. But her way of coping with it was just that she didn't want to see it. But it was always a bone of contention in the marriage. And we had counselling over it, you know, several times, but unfortunately it didn't work out. And the other thing is, I wanted kids, and she didn't. And I always thought that she would change her mind as she got older, as some women do, but unfortunately she didn't. So there was those two big things. So I initiated the first divorce. Now, during my second, during that divorce, I then went on to meet a woman who would eventually become my second wife, and I decided to tell her about my cross-dressing on our second date. I thought the first date was probably pushing it. It's not really the done thing. Hello, do you come here often? Oh, look, we've got matching knickers. It doesn't really work, does it? so, so, so I decided to tell her about it, and to my surprise and to my delight, she was absolutely okay with it. But there were conditions attached. You know, she said that as long as you don't dress more than once a week, which in those days I didn't. That was enough to satisfy the level of gender dysphoria that I had, and that was fine. I was okay with that, so that's fine. That was a tick in the box. And then there was another one. She said as long as you didn't want to transition fully, and at the time I absolutely didn't. I really didn't. I was happy as a man who needed to cross dress, so that was another tick in the box. That was fine, and it was great. So yeah, we got on really well, and our relationship blossomed. And then 9 years ago, we had a beautiful baby daughter who's the absolute centre of my universe. Anyway, it was quite a while before we actually got around to getting married, because I haven't gone through one divorce. It was very messy and very painful and expensive. The pain of that lasted with me for quite a while, and I always said I'd never get married again. But eventually I weakened, and then in August 2017, we did get around to getting married. But a few months before we got married, I happened to meet a clairvoyant and spiritual healer at this is where the eyebrows go up at a business networking meeting. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know if you ever go to any business networking events at all, but you just don't tend to. But you don't tend to meet clairvoyants or that sort of thing, do you?
No, you don't. That's true. Yeah,
they're all
meet a lot of interesting people, but I've never met a clairvoyant.
But they're all financial advisors and people like accountants and people like that. Nothing against those sort of people at all, but clairvoyants are far more interesting to talk to. They're amazing. So I was intrigued by her, and I was just chatting to her for most of the evening, to be honest. And then at the end of the evening, I thought, oh, I'm going to book up for a reading. I thought, I don't feel the need for a reading or anything, but I'm just intrigued. So I booked up for this reading, and I went along, and she blew me away. She really did. She said so many things that were just so true and pinpoint accurate that she couldn't have known from my website, because they were just little details that no way that anybody else could have known. But it was amazing. But then she also said lots of other things that didn't make sense at the time. Now, they make perfect sense now, but they didn't at the time. So she said some things like a new way of being, and there's an issue that you've always known about, but that you're not fully in integrity with. And she said, Spirit want you to go off for a long walk in the countryside and talk to yourself, talk to nature, and talk to Spirit, and they will show you what you need to see. So I thought, okay, well, I like walking anyway. What the hell?
I'm going to say I do that every morning.
Exactly, yeah. So I thought, okay, fine. So, but I was really busy at the time because it was on the run up to our wedding, and I was busy with my work as well. And so it was quite a while before I could sort of set aside the time to take myself off for a day to do that. So in the meantime, we got married, say in the August 2017. And it wasn't until early November 2017 that I did take myself off for a long walk and went over to Rutland Water, because I love it over there. Yeah, beautiful part of the country. And I worked out this really, really long route around the surrounding countryside, around the south part of it. And then I just came back along the south shore. So I thought I didn't want to just go walk around the reservoir, because that's when there's more likely to be lots of people. I went midweek as well, because I wanted to make sure that there weren't many people around. And I remember it now. It was a beautiful day. It was a cold, crisp, clear day with a blue sky, and the sun was shining. But it was very, very cold, and I went off with my map and my compass and my walking boots, and I was talking to myself, talking to nature and talking to Spirit, whoever they were. And if anybody saw me at the time, they thought it was completely off my trolley, but I thought, well, just go for it. What the hell? Yeah.
I wasn't going to say it, but
yes, you were. So I thought, oh God. So I remember feeling disappointed at the time, because I was naively expecting some sort of light bulb moment or some sort of voice to say, this is what you should be seeing. Strangely, that didn't happen. Can't imagine why. I thought, oh, perhaps I've done it wrong. Perhaps I should have just sat serenely by the water's edge looking out to the reservoir. But strangely, I don't know whether it was coincidence or not, I don't know. But strangely, it was around the same sort of time that my gender dysphoria increased dramatically. It went through the roof. It really did. And so much so that I just didn't know what gender I was at all. And I was in complete turmoil. I was so desperate to find out what my gender identity was. I was even typing into Google, what gender is Martin Neeves? Now, how crazy is that? Yeah. But I was desperate for information. Where do you go when you want information? You go to Google. Other search engines are available, of course. Sorry, this isn't the BBC. I didn't have to say that. So yes, so I was in complete turmoil, but I couldn't tell my wife about this inner turmoil because I didn't want to stir up a hornet's nest unnecessarily if it was just something of nothing. And at the same time, if I did tell her, it would lead to her asking me questions which I just didn't have the answers to. I had to work this out for myself. So the first thing I decided to do was to get some counselling. So I found a counsellor who had experience of dealing with people with gender issues. And I had several sessions with her, and I wrongly concluded at the end of those sessions that I was gender fluid. Now, I know now why I came to that conclusion, and that was my fear of admitting to myself that I was a transgender woman, that was making me trying to hang on to any bit of masculinity that I had. And so I understand that now, but at the time I didn't. But as well as doing that, I was working my way through a self-help workbook, which was written by a gender therapist from the States called Dara Hoffman Fox. It's an absolutely brilliant book, and it's basically on it's like psychotherapy in a book, and it's basically about how to identify your gender identity for people who are questioning. And it was a lot of work. It took me about 2 months to work my way through the book, and by the time I got to about 3/4 of the way through the book, it became obvious that I wasn't gender fluid. I was, in fact, a transgender woman. And then by the time I got to the end of that book, that conclusion hadn't changed. So now I had two conclusions, but they were different. So, okay, what can I do now? So finally, so I sent a text back to the clairvoyant, and I thought I should point out at this stage she's not just some sort of mystic Meg sitting in a caravan with a crystal ball predicting the lottery numbers. Although, to be honest, with the state of my finances at the moment, that would be quite useful. So if you do know of anyone like that, please let me know.
I'll be having them first.
Yeah, right, okay. Oh, drat. No, she's actually she's a spiritual healer specializing in clairvoyant healing, and she's a healer member of the National Federation of Spiritual Healers, which is recognized by the NHS. So she's got some credibility behind her. And she suggested that I go along for what she calls a vision quest session, which is a 4-hour interactive process. So it's a big old process, really is. And I went along to do that on the 11th of January 2018. And in that that session, basically she uses techniques such as deep meditation to really get me into a very, very relaxed state and to allow me to access my inner truth and to get past all my fear, because it's the fear that stops you admitting stuff. So it's just allows you to get past that. And it's really important to point out that during that session, she didn't give me any answers at all in that session. She just asked me a series of questions. It was question after question after question after question. Whether she got the questions from spirit or whether I haven't got a clue, don't know. But she just asked me all these questions, and she allowed all the answers to come from me and from my inner truth. And it was such an emotional session. I cried buckets in that session. It was really, really hard. And it was at the end of that session that that's when I admitted to myself that I am a transgender woman and that I need to change my body. And that was the point that I really felt female, and I really felt that Martin had stepped back and Katie had taken over. And I haven't looked back since. That's his, that it was exactly the right conclusion. So now, I knew my true gender identity. I had worked it out. I've got it, But there's one thing knowing it. There's another thing doing anything about it. So what now? What was I going to do with this new piece of information? I had a happy home life and I had a successful business. Could I put all of that in jeopardy for the sake of this piece of information? Then on the other hand, could I go back to living how I was before with this new piece of information eating away at me? Well, I didn't think that I could, and I think that was right. I don't think, the trouble is, once you know your true gender identity, you can't unknow it. That genie was not going back in the bottle. So I just think it would just eat away at me, and it wouldn't do me any good. So also the research that I did showed, because obviously there's no choice about being trans. I didn't want to be trans. And, if there was a choice, I would choose not to be trans. It's hard. It's a really hard journey, and it invariably involves a lot of loss, pain, and heartache along the way, as well as having to deal with hatred and bigotry as well. So it's not an easy journey at all. So so I didn't want to be trans, but I had no choice about being trans. The only choice I had about was whether I was going to do anything about it, and the research that I did showed that most trans people who decide to transition usually end up leading happy and fulfilled lives after the initial loss, pain, and heartache. It's a bumpy journey along the way, but usually they end up being happy. Whereas most trans people who end up living their lives for other people and not being their true selves, they're the ones that sadly often end up in a spiral of depression because they're not able to live their truth. And it's sad, it really is. So the urge to live my truth was just so overwhelmingly strong. So I just thought, well, I've just got to do this thing. I would say man up, but that's probably the wrong thing to say, isn't it? So the first thing I had to do was to tell my wife, and that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It really was. It took me a month to pluck up courage to tell her, and it went down as badly as you'd expect. I actually wrote a letter to her just in case my words didn't come out right. I was so worried about telling her. In the end, my words did come out right, but I gave her the letter at the end so she had something to refer to, because she was in complete shock. It was awful for her, and it's important to point out, I think, at this stage as well, that sexuality and gender are completely separate entities, and they're not linked at all. So for me, I've always been attracted to women, and I'm still attracted to women. That's been the one constant in my life, and that hasn't changed. What has changed is that the labels changed. So previously, I was labelled as a heterosexual man. Now I'm labelled as a lesbian. Well, it feels exactly the same to me. It doesn't feel any different. It's just the labels that society puts on people.
Yeah.
So that's all that is. But the thing is that the label hadn't changed for my wife. She was still attracted to men. So obviously there was a problem there. We tried counselling, but unfortunately that didn't work. So unfortunately that spelt the end of my second marriage. So it was a very short marriage, that one. So the next dilemma I had was what to do about the name of my photography and video business when I changed my name to Katie, because it was very strongly, very boldly branded after my old male name, Martin. It's called Martin Neeves Photography and Film.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that I could change the name of the business to Katie Neeves Photography and Film, but I felt that nobody would know who that was because I was pretty well known, and I'm actually still ranked second in the UK of photographers on Free Index purely from customer reviews. I've got something like 193 customer reviews, average rating of 4.9 out of 5, and so I was really proud of that. And so, and it had been an established brand for 22 years at that stage, and so I just thought, I didn't want to change the name of the business. It's the whole brand in itself. So I thought, I've just got to be Katie of Martin Neeves Photography and Film instead of Martin from Martin Neeves Photography and Film. So just sort of try and distance myself a little bit from the brand, But in order to do that, I'd have to come out very openly, very honestly, and very publicly as being trans, and continue to do that going forward. So it was a big commitment to do that. Mm-hmm. So I decided to make a coming out video. And so what I did on the 26th of April 2018, I decided to make that video public. And I sent it to all my clients and put it on all my social media. And I remember Facebook was the first one. And I remember vividly now my finger nervously hovering over the mouse, knowing that as soon as I make that click to make the video live, my life will never be the same again. Anyway, I made the click and I waited. but then I had to go on a job. My mind wasn't on the job at all. I was just, God, I was just, I was on autopilot. I mean, the client was very happy with the pictures, but I couldn't wait to get back just to see what was happening on Facebook, because I was so worried, because my whole livelihood, my reputation, everything rested on the reaction to that one video. It's the one most important video I've ever made in my life. Anyway, I didn't have worried, because when I got back, I was inundated with hundreds of messages of support. It was incredible. I felt so loved. I didn't do any work for 3 whole days, because I was so busy replying to all these lovely messages. And as well as having lots of lovely messages from friends and from clients, I also had messages from other trans people saying that they'd been struggling with it, and what I'd said had helped them. But there was one particular message that just stood out above all the others, and it was from a woman whose son had had gender issues when he was going through puberty, and he was being treated for it at a gender clinic for children. And she said that she was worried at the time that he would either be bullied, or he'd self-harm, or he'd even attempt suicide. And she was right to be worried. I mean, Stonewall's Trans Mental Health Survey of 2012 showed that 48% of trans people have attempted suicide at least once, and 84% have thought about it. Now, I'm one of the lucky ones. I never have, so I'm very lucky. But I'm surprised that those stats aren't higher, because most of my trans friends have attempted suicide. So it really struck a chord with me when she said that. And she said to me, she said, if only there was someone like you out there at the time her son was going through this, to let him know that it's okay to be trans, because it really is okay to be trans. And I thought, I've really got to do some good with this. So I decided to vlog my whole journey, just to bring people along on the journey with me, demystify it, make it accessible, so that people can see that trans people are just ordinary people who want to be safe, loved and happy, just like everyone else. And so that's what I've been doing. So I was vlogging my whole journey, and it was picked up initially by the local radio station. And so I started doing interviews from the local radio, and then local newspapers, and that escalated. I started doing national radio and television and national newspapers and magazines. And so all of a sudden I'd become this trans ambassador, if you like, or gobby trans woman, as I like to call myself. And so then it's led to my forming Cool2BTrans. So again, just to reach out to other trans people, to let them know that it really is okay to be trans, and to educate the general public about it, to show that we are just ordinary people. And so that's what I do now. So I do trans awareness training and public speaking and media appearances, just to further that cause. And it seems to be picking up quite a pace now, and I've been doing lots of things, and it was really picking up, just before lockdown. And of course then there was a massive dip, obviously, as everything was cancelled, because it was all done in person. But then now everybody's realized, well, actually you can do stuff online now, and so now it's all gone virtual now. So it's all like virtual training and doing virtual speaking to companies and things now, and speaking at conferences virtually. So that's what it is now. But hopefully eventually we'll all be allowed out again one day. Don't you love an optimist?
We've got to hope, haven't we?
Yeah, I hope
live
so,
in the same day again.
I know. So that's where it is now. And then in terms of my transition, I mean, I changed my name to Katie in July 2018. I've been living full-time as female for just over 2 years now, and it just feels so right. It really does. It's been such a whirlwind. So much has happened in that time, but there hasn't been a single day that I've got up in the morning and thought, oh, well, I'll pretend to be Martin again today. Not a single day. It feels so right. And I've lost count of the number of people who've told me how much happier I look now. And I'm not surprised, because it's the real me. And I'm still exactly the same person inside. I've still got the same skills, the same experience, the same sense of integrity, the same sense of humour, however warped that may be, but still exactly the same person, but far, far happier. You know, I also have cravings for chocolate now too, but it's a girl thing. Yeah. I have to have my emergency chocolate in the fridge. So, you know, it absolutely does feel so right. And you know, in terms of medically, you know, with my transition, I've been on hormone treatment now for 2.5 years, but that's only because I paid privately, purely because the NHS, you know, trans medical health care is absolutely broken. I'm on the waiting list you know, to be seen by an NHS gender clinic, but I've been waiting for 2.5 years and still haven't had my first appointment yet. And yet the NHS says that the guidelines say that you have to, you know, it's a maximum waiting time of 18 weeks. It's been 2.5 years so far, and there's still no sign of a first appointment. And then you don't get treated on the first appointment. It's only an assessment. Your treatment normally only starts on the second appointment, sometimes even the third. And you can often wait another year to get the second appointment. So it's just, it's horrendous. But I was in the fortunate enough position I was able to afford to pay privately. So that's why I've been able to, you know, I'm well on the way with my transition. But yeah, it just feels so right. And I think my main message to people is that fear often stops people doing things that they really need to do for their own well-being. And it could have easily have stopped me from A, admitting to myself that I was trans in the first place, and B, from doing something about it. But I've come to realize that the reality is usually a lot easier than you fear. And it certainly was, you know, in terms of coming out, and it certainly has been in terms of the way people are. I thought that it was going to be this world where everybody was going to be anti-trans. It's not. There's a small percentage of people who are, yes, and they're very noisy, but the vast majority of people are supportive. They really are. Generally, on a day-to-day basis, I don't have any problems. You know, it's great. People are fantastic. And I remember my first day of living full time. I started living full time as female on the 2nd of September 2018. And the first day of living full time as female, you know, going out on a job, you know, as Katie and with, you know, in a dress, I was so worried, you know, how would people react? They were absolutely fine. No problem at all. It's just not a big deal. You know, people have got their own problems to worry about. They don't need to worry about anything that's going on with me. So, you know, I think that's what I would say to people is that if they're worried about doing something big with either their business or their career, their personal life, whatever, you know, acknowledge that fear, because that's normal, that's human. But then go for it anyway, because most people regret the things in life that they don't do, not the things they did do. So that's pretty much my story.
So, I mean, I suspect because you're used to telling the story, that the reason that I've just heard this beautiful tale is down to that as well. But I love the way that you're just very open about things, and you've got a very bright, positive outlook on it as well. And whilst you're talking, then I was actually looking at my mug here that my friend Lindsay got me that says, "The only choice I ever made was to be myself."
Yep, absolutely.
And going back to the piece where you were talking about the business and choosing to keep Martin on as the name above the door. We've just had, for the benefit of the listeners, when we're recording, we've just had National Coming Out Day on Sunday. Is there have you had an experience, or how do you feel? How do people react when they see for the first time that Martin is a trans woman?
Well, in terms of my clients, they know obviously when they book me. You know, I would have spoken to them before, and you know, I'm very open about it. I mean, for quite a while, I've taken it off now. I mean, it's on my both my websites, the Martin Neeves Photography website and obviously Cool2BTrans is all about being trans anyway. But with the Martin Neeves Photography one, I've got an About Me page, I've got pictures of what I used to look like before and everything. So I'm just totally open and upfront about it, so they know. Although a lot of people actually don't look at that, and so I do still get phone calls asking for Martin, and obviously then I just explain. But for quite a while, I did actually have in my email signature, I had a little note saying, Martin is not my husband, my father, my my brother, or my business partner. I used to be called Martin. For more information, click here, and then it would go through to the Cool2BTrans website. So
what a great way to do it. That's amazing.
So he said, but I've taken it off now because I think, well, no, I'm just Katie. That's fine. Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting that it's funny, a lot of people sort of say to me, oh, you need to change the name of the business to Katie Neeves Photography. Why the hell are you keeping your dead name? And a lot of trans people call their old name their dead name because they really can't cope with it. And I'm very unusual in that respect, in that I don't like being called Martin because that's not my name anymore. But I'm very happy referring to Martin, and I'm completely at peace with my past, and I'm proud of Martin, and I'm proud of everything I've achieved as Martin, and I'm grateful to Martin for stepping back and allowing me to be Katie. So I bear absolutely no malice at all to Martin or the name Martin. So in some ways, it's quite an affectionate thing because it's a nice way of keeping the name going, even though it's not my name. So it's still, the name's going in my business, but it's not my name anymore. So it's quite a nice way of doing it. And I'd say I'm just completely comfortable with it. It's not for everybody. In fact, the majority of trans people wouldn't dream of doing that because they call it their dead name, which I think is ever so sad, but I never have. But I could, yeah. I mean, I could actually change it to Katie Neeves Photography and Film now because of all the work I've done with Cool2BTrans, I'm better known now as Katie than I was as Martin. But I'm not going to, because it's part of my story, and I'm proud of it. So I'm keeping it the same.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, I'm a branding professional, so I'm listening to you talking and going, well, that's part of your legacy. And there's plenty of dead people that have got huge legacies that people tell and that we look back on and that we learn from.
Yeah.
It's almost erasing a part of you.
Exactly. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to erase the previous 48 years of my life. That's all part of me. It's been a big part of my life. So yeah, it's just embracing the whole me.
I love it. Gosh.
I mean, I did lose some clients as well. So it hasn't all been plain sailing. So I did lose some clients, but at the time I thought, well, yes, I missed the money, but I didn't miss them because I thought, well, I only want to work for nice people. I don't want to work for people. They're not going to get it. Then stuff them. Yeah. Yeah. I'd want to, I want to work for nice people, and it opened the way to me picking up new clients from people who totally get me, and also then expanding Cool2BTrans and really building that. And that's the thing that I think that's really going to go forward and take over, to be honest.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much for your time, Katie. I've really enjoyed listening to you there. Fantastic career story there. How can people find out more about you online?
Probably the best thing to do is just to go to my website, which is all the W's and cool2btrans.co.uk. So that's cool, so that's COOL, and then the number 2, the letter B, then trans, TRANS.co.uk. And there's links to all my social media and stuff on there. Or they could look me up on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. I'm everywhere. Either look up Cool2BTrans or Katie Neeves. You'll find me. You can't get rid of me.
Excellent. I will put it in the show notes so that people can find it easily as well.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time, as I said. Thank you to the listeners today as well for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you're enjoying the series, then leave a review as well, and we'll see you next time.